Yes.
Okay, let's go back a little bit before we talk about the strategic planning, because this is connected. In 2022, Rotary International did a survey, and they asked people, why did they join Rotary? What mattered most to them when they joined? Okay, so let's start off with the all of the above, because that captured 25% basically of all of them. But the rest of the people said community service, number one. They wanted friendship. They wanted to do international service, or they wanted to be involved in professional connections, which used to be a very, very big part of Rotary, and in leadership skill development. And then there was about 3% left down here, 2% on the other, and 1% said they didn't know or it wasn't applicable to them. I have no idea what not applicable would mean in this particular case. Okay, so did anybody notice what was missing from that list?
Youth and education.
Well, let's see. Maybe it was hidden in the other category, the 2%.
Service.
Sure. Okay. Nobody said that to become president of the Rotary Club.
Hi, Scott. Glad you can make it.
Hardly anybody said
right now because I have another Zoom going on the other side of me.
Can I get you to mute yourself for a moment?
I think I just got him, Bob.
Not to become a district governor. And certainly not to develop a Okay, I'm back with you. Okay. So I want to go back to a very famous 20th century philosopher by the name of Yogi Berra. Okay. Sometimes these guys say things that are pretty significant and we just don't realize it. Yogi said, and somebody else has said it in different ways, if you don't know where you're going, you probably will end up in someplace else. Right? This is Ann's, and I think it's one of the best things I've ever seen in terms of planning. Okay, here's a guy, and I thought about this when I was thinking about the guy that escaped from the prison in Pennsylvania the other day and how he got up that wall. And this guy went a different direction. He was about to get a big surprise when he did. Okay, so why are strategic plans needed? Okay, Rotary International did a survey in 2022, a very detailed and very long survey. And it said that clubs with strategic plans are more vibrant, and they got data to prove that. And the members of that club, of the clubs that had a strategic plan, had a much more positive view of their particular club. And they also had a more positive view about the effectiveness of the club in the community. The reference to this is Rotary's action plan and a course that they offer on the Rotary website under learning, which, by the way, is an incredible resource, which we haven't tapped into. It's getting better by the day. Second reason is change is sort of into us really in a heavy duty way. We have change in the demographics of Rotary that we're going through, the millennials, and the new generations who are born coming after 1990, the Generation Zs, are joining the clubs, and they have different ways of looking at the club. The pace of change has certainly changed very quickly, and all of the technology that we're using. All of these dictate the need for sound strategic planning and, in red, intentional implementation of the plans. So many times in the past, plans have been developed but have never been really implemented in the clubs and have never really been effective as a result of that. So, as Ann says, sell the problem, not the solution. Okay? Explain why change is necessary to your members and answer the question of why status quo is not an option. This is something that's happening to mainline churches, and it's happening to service clubs as well. So how do you get started in all of this? Well, Number one, you need a small team to oversee the development and the implementation of the plan. Small team, 2 to 3, 4 absolute max. Secondly, to get the process going, you're going to need an unbiased facilitator, and we suggest, not essential, but we suggest that this not be a club member. We would be happy to train one of your club members to do this and stand back. Let the club member do it, but we really, if we can, we'd like to get somebody from outside your club. Most important, from my perspective, is that you have to have commitment from both the board and the club. So we don't want anybody tonight to say, "Okay, we're ready. We're going to do this next week." That's not the case here. Okay. And lastly, we want you to look at Rotary International's action plan and the District 7090 strategic plan for 2023-26, because these two plans are what generated this whole process this evening. Anne started with the looking at the strategic plan for 2023-26, and she said to me, "Why don't we, instead of the 5 strategies that we had on ours, why don't we look at the ones that RI came up with in their action plan and see if they fit us?" So we did that, and we thought there was a great match. We also think that this match can make it a lot easier for clubs to develop a strategic plan for themselves. Here are the 4 areas, and they're simple. Increase our impact, expand our reach, enhance participant engagement, and increase our ability to adapt. There's virtually nothing that can't be slotted into one of these 4 areas. I'd like you to keep those in mind because they're important, and yet they're going to come back subtly in a few minutes. Okay. So what we did then was, instead of having our 5 areas, which we had in previous years, we put them in here, and they're exactly the same. So this is the opening page of our Rotary District 7090 strategic plan. So here's what we have then. We have a strategy, increase our impact. The strategy is explained a bit. The words in our District 1 are a little heavy. They're a little heavier in the Rotary International one. And what I've done is I've made them even simpler, as you'll see in a couple of minutes. Over here under 1A, you can see one of our tactics. Now, these used to be called different things. We're calling them tactics. I don't want to talk about whether they should be tactics or goals or objectives or whatever. It's something that has to be done. So in this one, we're a district and we don't do things. We help clubs to do things. That's what we're here for, is to serve. So this is our district's one, to assist clubs to build effective membership plans. Okay. And then over here is our June the 2024 goal. And that is to assist 12 interested clubs in developing their membership plans. So there's the one it comes under. Here's an explanation of what it means. And by the way, those are in red are for a reason, as you'll see in a moment. Okay. And what we suggest is that there are 5 criteria that you can use to measure whether or not these are good tactics or good goals. And that is, they should be realistic, specific, results-oriented, measurable, and have a time frame. And if you have those things, these will be doable for your club. So here's the first one. I thought that was a bit too heavy. So what I did was I shortened it to, we can improve our projects and outcomes, creating more effective change. And then what you can do is develop the tactics and goals to go along with them. I just use one as an example. We've got all the other ones as well. Keeping in mind, number 1, this will not save a declining club, this process. It may not. It could. It's best for a club that is growing or is stable. As a district, we can probably do 5 or 6 clubs during the current Rotary year, and perhaps more if we can get some people who we can do a little bit of training with in terms of facilitation and getting this going. So here are the steps involved. The first one is to look at the club today, where we are. The step 2 is to where's it we want to be, and then number 3, set the strategies, tactics, and the goals for the club. I'm going to go over these in a little bit more detail. So the steps in the process. Where are we now? You look at where the club is and what it brings to now. What are the things that are causing the club to have to look at the situation as it is now? Develop or review a club vision statement. Now, this can take a long time. So I was trying to see if I could get a way that we could maybe make this easier for your clubs. And I'm going to come back to this one in the next slide. Look at the Rotary International Action Plan, just the 4 areas to become familiar with them, and look at our organizer as a district as a framework. Establish your tactics for a year or longer. Establish a short-term goal, 1 year usually for each tactic, and then implement and monitor. So what I've been trying to do with this process is to try and make it as simple as possible for people to use with their clubs. So look at the vision statement just for a moment. Here's the Rotary International vision statement. I went through a whole bunch, about 80, vision statements from other clubs throughout the world. I picked out 4 that was all in North America, but I've got them from all over. Let's look at them just quickly. Elizabethtown is in Pennsylvania. Rotary Club of Sarnia. Penticton Sunrise. Cambridge Sunrise. Look at the words. Look how many times they're repeated. Engaged, engaged. Vibrant Service Club. Neighbors, friends, right? Our club, our membership. What do we do? Serve humanity locally, globally. What do we do? Serve humanity locally and globally. What do we do? Advance global understanding. What do we do? Come together, create positive, lasting change in the community around the world. So I've got about 50 of these. I'll supply them to you, and you can take them to your clubs and you can show them to them, and they can say, okay, this one is pretty close to what we would maybe we could use. Let's just change this and this and this. At least you've got a starting point. You don't have to go from point 0. And all of these reflect the Rotary International vision statement. So strategy 1, increase your impact. Here's what you do with it. Suggested criteria are realistic, specific, results-oriented, measurable, and a time frame. Implementation. Just briefly, it's the key to the whole process from my perspective. Too often, we move from awareness to wanting support from our clubs and wanting to be able to advocate for a particular thing without taking the club through the understanding. So we're suggesting that some time be spent on helping the club to understand what it is that we're doing, and then get committed to doing that. And that will have positive effects at the end run. At the district level, how we make the implementation work is, over the last year, I went back and looked at how much time in a 2.5-hour meeting we spend on elements of the strategic plan, and it ranged from 35 to 48% of the time at a meeting. So at the club level, what that means for me is that what we should be doing is, if we have a plan at the club level, at your board levels, you should be looking at where you are with particular things. Okay. At the district level, what happens is every committee chair sends in a little report at the before the meeting actually occurs. What I do is I take those reports and I summarize them, and I look at trends and patterns, and I forward those to the district to the district governor chain gang group. They call it the district governor chain, but it's a district governor group. And then I say, here are the areas that seem to be emerging as significant areas for concern. And so that what happens, you can do that at the club level, have people send in a little, prepare a little report for the board, and then you can use those as the basis. But it's the implementation that's really good, that's really significant. So to review, establish a team to start the process. Get the board and club committed. Go through these steps as I've gone over them with you. At the end of all this, let's talk. All right, there's my email address. I'm going to be sending you a copy of this particular thing. We'd like to know where you are. Okay, we'd like to know your interest level. Are you taking it back to your club for discussion? Not tonight. Okay, you can just let me know in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 2 months, doesn't matter. We'll probably want to do it in the current year. We'd like to know that fairly soon if you do want to do that. Sign us up. We're ready to go. Some of you may have been under the process already, and you just need to have a facilitator come in. Or my club needs a presentation to get the process started. With what I've got here for you, you can do that. But if you need somebody else to come in and do it, we'll see what we can do. Whatever. Let's just keep in touch. Okay. Thank you very much for your attention. I appreciate it very much. And I'm going to hand you over to Matt.
Did you keep the slide deck going, Bob, or should I bring up?
I can. So it's not up there.
There were a few more pages, and I guess before kind of moving in, this would be a really good kind of natural break time. So Bob just covered a whole bunch of really, really great stuff. So I guess at this point in time, we'd like to open it up for a few minutes of questions in regards to anything that you just saw or heard. Inspired, afraid. Let us know what you're thinking.
Oops.
I have a quick question, if you don't mind.
Please.
So, no, you gave us the strategic directions, the 4 strategic directions that came from Rotary International. If you weren't going to use those specific ones, how do you move from a SWOT analysis to defining in a regular process what your strategic objectives should be? Or are they not linked?
If I could react, if you look at those general strategies, anything that you come up with probably will fit into those areas. We're just suggesting that they can be used as a framework for development. That's all. If you choose not to use those, that's okay too.
But okay, so I guess my other question then is, you go through the SWOT. How do you use that information that you compile during the SWOT in your further steps down the process? Like, how do you integrate the information that comes out of a SWOT analysis?
Matt?
Yeah. And in terms of the 4 boxes, I guess all of that information is ultimately going to be out there, and then kind of go through a prioritizing strategy where sometimes we open that up to the whole club. Maybe that's in a whole club session where you do some dot voting and to kind of prioritize what the 3 or maybe 5 things that are most important for the club to work on, and then utilizing some of the framework that Bob just showed, and then trying to put things into, I'd say, for me, I like the acronym SMART, because a lot of people are familiar with that. You know, what Bob showed was exactly the same steps, just, you know, with, you know, different letters leading things in. But then ultimately you're going to take those things and you're going to put some sort of just brief action plan together and ultimately have what and who's responsible and when it's going to be due by, and then some sort of cadence of how often do we check in on those things. And in the presentation, Bob was suggesting, maybe 1 year, but depending on the cadence of your club and whether that's, whether the committees are getting together on a monthly basis or quarterly basis, I might suggest a more frequent check-in to make sure that things are kind of staying on track.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, I was president-elect of Grand Island in 2018 and worked with Matt. We did a strategic plan. We had 5 at that time. I would say that's way too many. We probably, over the last few years, worked on 3 of those. As I like the idea of you cutting them down to 4. And yeah, it's a struggle. Especially in a club that doesn't have committees. We have champions and we have boards, and the 7 active members are the members of the board. So I am going to charge our new president-elect to take that old strategic plan and take the advice that you guys are providing and get her to think about that. We have, as a board, voted to do a survey, and I know in the past the district has made surveys available. So I'm interested in what's currently available.
From a survey perspective, Sherry, we've, usually the way the process kicks off is there'll be a short communication between whoever at the club level is interested in being part of that small team. And out of that information gathering, then that helps us kind of customize the survey. The survey questions are mostly based on, some of the RI club health, but there's way too many questions in there. We find that if we can kind of reduce that down to these are the 10 most pertinent questions, that, you start to get a lot better responses. And again, I would suggest that all through this stuff, it was a big lesson learned for us as we go through this, that a 15-page strategic plan that has all these great things that sits on a bookshelf and isn't actionable is worthless. You're much better off just choosing one thing and going to work on that immediately. So, and then starting to build kind of that club muscle that, we can prioritize our most important priorities and put action steps together to accomplish those things and then, knock them down.
Yeah,
So-
the district strategic plan is 3 pages. That's it. Kathy started up, has her hand up. Kathy?
Yeah, thank you, Bob, and thanks, Matt. I was just wondering if you had an extended timeline on this in terms of, is this a plan to actually, I know you mentioned 1 year, but should we be looking to a 2 and 3 year plan so that we can align goals over a period of time?
Yep. If you want to do 3-year goals, that's all part of the process. But some people might want to just do a 1 year just to get it going. So,
Yeah, clearly it depends on each club and the structures that they have.
Yep.
But, and then I think I suspect we're talking then about really trying to bring everybody in within the committees of a club into alignment around the 1 or 2 or 3 goals that have been selected. Is that the idea here?
Yes, I would suggest that there's the small kind of initial group that does a lot of the work, and you'll hear, one of the stories that we're going to hear is from Lockport, and Ellen can talk a little bit about this, but we work pretty extensively with a core group of 2 or 3 people. And then kind of once we got a main theme, so we took this whole big thing, kind of compressed it down to here, then brought in all the folks that were part of the board. And so that was a smaller group yet before it even went to the bigger club. So it's kind of a gradual expansion to kind of get things really identified before it goes into general club.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I'm going to speak up then.
Yeah.
I think where I really could use some help, and I think a lot of clubs in my area could use some help, is in the translating this into an operational plan in a volunteer organization. I could have done this in my office, no problem. I could have held somebody's feet to the fire, and when the committee didn't get something done or the person in charge of it didn't get done, I could, why the hell isn't this getting done? I expect this done by thus and such a date or else. But in a volunteer organization, that is often a tough sell, and particularly if you're in a club where leadership is an issue, where the next person who becomes president isn't as committed to this whole thing and doesn't want you to be squeezing the members to do the stuff in the plan, it becomes an issue. So I would really value some tools about implementing this in a volunteer organization. And more, I guess what I'm really saying is a better way to get buy-in. People will be happy to go. We had a lovely session with Ann where everybody would nod their head. Yep, that's a good idea. Yep, that's a good idea. Let's let Tommy do it and, ignore everybody else. And I think it's a difficult thing in a volunteer organization, particularly in a small volunteer organization, to make this fly.
I agree 100%, Tommy. And that's why we're putting the emphasis at the front end of this and saying that you have to get the board commitment and the club commitment before you even start. And to drop it in on them is just not going to work. Jim Simpson?
Yeah, I was just going to kick in a thought about that. I think that it needs to be tied in with succession planning, in as much as if you put your incoming president in charge of strategic planning, he's got a vested interest for making sure that it unfolds as he's president of the club. He's got a vested interest. He's got responsibility for its execution. And so I think tying this process to succession planning of the club leadership puts responsibility and accountability in its right place.
Absolutely. Agree 100%.
I was also going to ask if I could, I'd like to expand a little bit or hear a little bit more about what Matt was talking about, because you talked about a lot about this little wee group that goes off to the side and comes out with the plan. And we've had a little bit in our club, a little bit of an example of that happening. And when you get a little wee group off to the side doing their thing, ultimately the club has to buy in. You have to lead the club to get them to follow you along this path. And so I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how this sort of little tiger team includes the club as a whole, gets the voice of the little guy who's never heard to be heard, and how you bring that guy along. Can you talk a little bit more about that, please?
I think we can. So I think the way it's happened so far, Jim, is that within a club assembly or within some sort of club meeting, right? Either, as you say, the current president or president-elect is going to kind of open up the floor for, hey, we don't have a strategic plan. We'd really like a strategic plan. Traditionally, that's been on the president or on the president-elect with, kind of mixed results. So the ask is there anybody in the club that would be interested in championing this effort? And then hopefully somebody raises their hand, or somebody in your club has some experience with strategic planning that, you can kind of go on the side and recruit. And that kind of starts the whole process. And then nothing's done in a vacuum. I mean, there are, kind of regular reports that come out of these, little, tiger team or, little, say kind of action events. And it doesn't take very long. This is happening pretty quick. It's, on a cadence of every other week or so where there's some communication and some action. And really what you're trying to do is you're trying to drive a whole bunch. Here's kind of a framework of all these different concepts, and then drive that down into, this is our plan for moving this forward. And those next steps can be club survey. But again, out of the club survey, do you want the whole club looking at the results, or do you want, kind of the little mini committee? And that's totally up to your club and how you want to process that and process it in the best way. I really like Bob's idea of, where you have 20 people around the table, you're probably not going to make a decision. We found that, 3 or 4 can help prioritize things and put them in choices of 2 or 3 things for people so that it's better to make a decision going forward. So, but it's never done in a vacuum. It's not a team that locks itself away for 6 months and then comes out with your fully baked strategic plan. That's not what this is. Does that make sense? All right. Well,
yeah,
so,
I'd like to jump in. We participated, the Greater Jamestown AM Rotary participated in a vision process with Ann a few years ago. And it pretty much the way you described, there were a couple of us that were interested in developing a vision statement, and kind of took a look at the survey stuff that was out there, and we were way too ambitious in putting our own questionnaire together. But we did bombard our membership. We're a small club, so in some respects it made it easier to follow through. And we had it in front of the membership, collected some data, and had it in front of the membership within a month. And I think what made it the easy part of it was that our club is quite active. We have some doers that make things happen, and so we can go out and do some fundraising and find some worthy folks that deserve our support. We are working on our governance side. And that's where I think it's still a challenge for us. I do have a president-elect sitting with us, and so I'm hopeful that she's going to be a catalyst that's going to help us move forward. But we've made some small steps, and we've got more. We basically a couple of our targets were things that we were already doing, and I mean, they were kind of natural things to pick up on, and we're going to try and follow your directions and make it simpler this time, because we were way too ambitious the last time.
Bite off a little more than you can chew. And then I think going back to Tommy's question, and then we'll kind of wrap it up for now. There'll be another time for questions and answers, but kind of next on the agenda, we've got a couple of the clubs that have gone through the process recently to kind of walk through what they experienced. And then we've got a breakout, and then we'll end with some questions and answers. So, Tommy, I think back to your question, and trying to do that in a not-for-profit or a volunteer organization is the eternal challenge. So, and that's another great reason why smaller is better. And within the club, there's doers and there's non-doers, and we all want everybody to be a doer, but we also know that that's probably not realistic. So the idea, I think, in general, is to think of it as a flywheel. And if you can get the flywheel turning a little bit, you're going to get a few more people jumping on to be doers. So that's kind of the less is more to start. And then as you start to accelerate, maybe you can trickle in, a few more initiatives quarter over quarter or year over year. All right. I'm going to see if I can't take over the screen here and share. Yes. All right. Did that work?
Yep.
All right.
Yes.
Cool. I think Oksana joined us. Oksana, are you there?
I'm here, yes.
All right, cool. I'm going to advance to next slide. So there's a lot of stuff on this slide, but Oksana's going to kind of talk to it, kind of the overall process for the St. Catherine's Club over the past year, from kind of start to finish strategic plan.
Okay, so thanks for inviting me. I'm currently the president of the Rotary Club of St. Catherine's, and when our club undertook this process starting in January of this year, I was in the role of president-elect. So some of the conversations that have just taken place kind of really speak to, I mean, I was invested in having a strategic plan as I was moving into my presidency. Some of the other factors for our club was just necessity. COVID really had a negative impact on our club. We had been losing members consistently, and we really didn't kind of have a roadmap of where we wanted to go. And the club membership had changed significantly since our last strategic plan. So in terms of who was involved, in our club, we have a long range planning committee, and by virtue of position, I was chairing that. So that became the group that sort of steered our strategic planning process. Further then, we certainly had lots of membership input and participation, and ultimately board approval. When our long range planning committee came together, there were a few things that we said. We wanted it to be a simple process. We wanted to sort of have our plan kind of on one page, not like a 20-page document like our last plan had been. And we wanted the process to be as inclusive as possible for our membership, because we wanted the buy-in there. So we started in January of this year. We created a hybrid, our own pulse check survey. We picked and chose questions from some of the Rotary tools, etc. So we put out a Survey Monkey to our membership. It was really easy. Lots of reminders had to happen, again, to get sort of participation, but I think we had close to 60% survey participation of our club. Our club was at that time 78 members. We then shared those results at a meeting of our club, again, just to keep them informed, and so that they saw how their input and their feedback was sort of rolling up to sort of the themes of the club. And then our intention was to have a planning session. And it was at the point in time that we had put out the survey that I reached out to Anne and Matt to see whether they could facilitate the next steps of our planning process. So they joined our committee, and together we looked at the results of the survey and designed a one-evening planning session based on that. So I think it was a 2.5-hour session with dinner served. And we got about 30 members, close to 30 members out. Some were, we had to sort of tap their shoulders to really encourage them to come. But we got participation, and having Anne and Matt facilitate it was really helpful, because we could all participate, and then Matt and Anne could also bring in perspectives of the district and kind of what's generally happening. And their advice was certainly helpful even in designing the planning session in terms of what we wanted to walk away from that. So they facilitated the session. They drafted a report and some sort of key actions that there were lots of flip charts in this session, and they sort of brought it together. I do want to mention that people left that meeting feeling really positive. A lot of them were showing up saying, oh, I hate these kinds of meetings, I don't enjoy them. But people really left that planning session feeling like it was worthwhile, and they were feeling energized. And some members saying, I was really questioning kind of where this club was going and whether I wanted to continue, but I'm feeling optimistic now. So that rolled up into sort of some priorities, action plans, and then that draft plan was presented to a full membership meeting. There were some polls taken right at that membership meeting, and the themes were endorsed by our membership. And then 1 month later, it went to our board for approval. So we're now in our year 1 implementation. So that's kind of the process. Matt, if you just flip to the next slide, I'll just kind of share with you what the outcome. So this is, sorry, we have a fuller report, but this is our placemat summary. So our mission and vision are positioned at the top. And then we have our 4 strategic areas of focus. Some of these will probably be familiar with the issues for your club: membership, recruitment and retention, membership engagement, which we treated separately, communications and public image, and fundraising. And then what we have in the sort of italic text below that is, what are the problems that we're trying to resolve under those themes, and then year 1 actions that had been developed and sort of consolidated. So that's been presented to the club. It's now sort of part of our board meetings as our committees are setting up now. I'm reaching out to them saying, here are some of the action plans that rest with your committee, and we're moving things forward along that way. So in a nutshell, that's kind of the process and kind of where we landed.
Thank you, Oksana. And Ellen Roth was going to talk briefly about Lockport's experience, which is an entirely different one, which I guess is something that I would also like to offer up, which is somewhere along the line we went from one process, fits all kind of way of doing this to a much more customized approach. And it's really from a district support perspective, really trying to support you at the club level with whatever you need. So let me go. I don't think Ellen has any slides, so I'm going to go back to this one. And just, Ellen, do you want to talk through your process?
Thanks, Matt. Just to let everyone know too, I'm grateful for this opportunity just to acknowledge the support we've gotten from the district in our whole strategic planning process. Matt's been a great assist on this. This all started for our club at probably even more than a year ago, the start of the 2022-23 Rotary year. The club had a 5-year plan from 2018 that needed to be reevaluated. So the current president, Maureen, recruited me to champion the strategic planning effort for our club for 2023. And I told her right off the bat, I'm not really a big fan of strategic planning. To me, it always seemed like a lot of talk and not a lot of stuff happening, not a lot of action. So I was grateful when Matt came on board and really refreshed my outlook on this and talked about it being more of a vision to action process rather than calling it, we've been avoiding the whole strategic planning moniker and just calling it our vision to action process. So in the fall of 2022, Maureen and I started meeting virtually and via email with Matt to kind of get the ball rolling, set some priorities, look at the RI strategic plan and the existing club strategic plan to kind of guide our process. At the time we had, and we still, I think we're a little bit less, we had about 65 members at the time. I think we're at about 60 right now. Unfortunately, like a lot of clubs, the pandemic derailed a lot of the action items that were in our 2018 plan. And we determined that membership is the strategic priority. There, Tommy, or you had shown that slide with the 4 boxes of the priorities to look at, and we really zeroed in on membership and engagement as the top focus, with the need to start with a real definition and engagement of what an agreement on what engagement is. Our club is blessed in that we're very diverse, but then that poses a problem too, because we have 90-year-olds that are at a different place in their Rotary journey than our 30-year-olds. So we were trying to figure out what do all of our members think engagement really means. So in January of 2023, we sent a Google survey out to active members, asking for their completion, asking them to complete it within 2 weeks. We gave them a real short time frame. We only did 1 reminder, and we got about a 55% response rate. It was short. It was 15 questions, 5 of which were to determine their age and how long they've been in Rotary, male or female, those kinds of biographical questions. So it was really 10 questions about engagement. And we compiled those results into a PowerPoint and presented them at a club assembly. Again, like everybody's been saying, getting that buy-in from everybody. And at that meeting, we requested volunteers to serve on the vision team from the folks that were present. We do all of our meetings both in person and we put a Zoom link out. So there's always people that are at work or at home or whatever that snowbirds, whatever, that watch it on Zoom. So we put a request out for volunteers to serve on this vision team. And then Maureen and I and one other member kind of tagged a few additional members who don't always have the opportunity to come to our lunch meetings that we thought would be valuable participants on the team. And several of them said yes. So we had about 12 or 14 people agree to serve on this team from our club. So in February, we scheduled a meeting with Matt as the facilitator at a restaurant where we tried to transition all that club feedback from the survey into some action steps to improve our club's engagement. So we used the steps outlined by the district and we got some great discussions going, and the meeting ran way longer than I thought it was going to run. And the poor restaurant servers were waiting for us to come and eat dinner because we were so busy talking. But we agreed on the problem to solve is to increase engagement. We used that dot voting on the flip charts and stuff on the walls. I don't think we really came up with a consensus on an inspirational vision for the club. That's still kind of something we want to put a pin in. We agreed that the desired future state has to convey the basic message of this is who we are as a club and this is what we do, both internally to our members and externally to the community. We need to get that to be our future state. We also agreed to use our existing committee structure. Basically, we said we have a really good committee structure and a really good administrative code that defines what all those committees are supposed to do. We agreed, let's just not reinvent the wheel. Let's use that committee structure as our blueprint, as our menu to increase engagement. So we figured we really need to look at our individual members' needs and do an assessment of those needs and really do it one-on-one. So in May of 2023, things kind of slowed down and got bogged down for a variety of reasons, but we met with both our current president, our incoming president, and a couple of key, again, this was that small tiger group. We crafted a plan for individual assessments. And what we decided to do was to hold one-on-one engagement chats with our active members. We assigned 3 to 4 members to each member of our team, giving them the task to schedule a face-to-face, virtual if necessary, but preferably face-to-face meeting, go have coffee, stop by their office, whatever you can do. And we supplied them each with a printed copy of that member's club runner profile and said, here's your 3 or 4 members, here's your 3 or 4 members. And they each had a printed copy of their profile as a jumping off point. The idea being go over their profile with them, write any updates, changes, email addresses, check all the basic biographical information, confirm that the member understands the basics of logging in and using Club Runner, because I know it's cumbersome and a lot of people don't like it, but it's our communication tool. And it is a key way to stay connected with the club, especially for folks who can't attend our lunch meetings, our noontime meetings. And it was also a chance then to talk about our club's standing committees and learn what work, what projects, what functions most appeal to you, Joe member. Really the goal was just trying to meet each member where they live in their Rotary journey, listen to what they have to, what feedback they want to give. And we had hoped to wrap this up. We waited until after July 1st until everybody paid their dues. So we knew who was actually an active member for 23-24. So that started in July. We hoped to wrap it up by the end of August, but summer and people got busy. So we're still actually in the process of meeting with folks one-on-one. The goal of all these conversations really is just to build stronger committees and maybe eliminate some committees that are no longer relevant to our club and grow engagement from our active members for the upcoming year. So it's taking longer and it's harder to do than we had hoped. A couple of our team members have kind of said, yeah, I'm done. It's too much work. I think they kind of were just like, I wanted to give you my feedback, but I don't really want to do any work about it. Tommy kind of touched on that. I'm happy to raise my hand and tell you what I think, but don't ask me to do any work. But we still do have a key core group of team members and we're enjoying the process. These one-on-ones have been great. The ones that I've done so far have been great and people have given me similar feedback. So that's where we're at right now.
Thank you, Ellen. Let's see, we're at 7:52. So we were going to do a 10-minute breakout, but we are not going to do that. So I'm going to advance to what the breakout idea was going to be. And then I think, as a follow-up, we would be happy as a committee to do this. Or again, I think Bob's sending out the presentation to everybody that is listening in today. And just kind of think of this is a super quick exercise, right? You can do this in 10 minutes. So you can fit this into any of your club meetings. And it's a way to kind of get the juices flowing. All this stuff doesn't have to be complicated, but you actually have to do something. So we've really got to build that doing muscle. So the question that I was going to ask you tonight was, in your Rotary Club, what's the one thing that if improved would make everything better? And then why? So, and then kind of you would have been discussing that in a group of 6 or so people, to which then everybody's input comes together. And then kind of with a quick once around the table discussion, you kind of, hey, what's out of all of that input that we just heard, what's the one thing that we really want to work on right now? And then just put it maybe a simple, 1 or 2 bullet point solution to that issue. And that was going to be the exercise. So, and it's fantastic. You can try it inside your club. So unfortunately, we got a little thin on time here toward the end. And then another kind of, question idea. There's big influence on me for a number of years is a gentleman by the name of Dan Sullivan. He runs an organization called Strategic Coach. He asked this question of all his clients, and it's just a fantastic question to work into a strategic planning or a visioning or a desired future state, whatever that happens to be. But I'll let you read through this question real quick. The cool thing about that question is it kind of flips things, right? We have a hard time going in the future, but if we're in the future and we're looking back into the past, it just kind of flips your brain a little bit and rewires the circuits. So that's another interesting one to use as part of that same exercise. And I'll add in one other bonus kind of idea in regards to some of these things, as Bob mentioned, you want to kind of put, hey, we want to look a year out there. Sometimes a year is a little bit fuzzy. So there's a process that Toyota in their Toyota production system had developed that's really, it's super clean, and it's just 5 questions that you're always asking yourself, or I mean, better if it's kind of under, kind of a coach and a learner that's going through these things. But if you dropped one of your issues into the kind of these 5 questions, and then asked yourself these 5 questions, what's the target condition? The target condition is somewhere between where you are right now and ultimately where you want to go. It's just a small step. If you consider your journey like a stairway, it's just that first step. That's your target condition. It doesn't have to be a year from now. It doesn't have to be 3 months from now. It can be 2 weeks, or it can be 2 months. So you set that. Then you go back in and you actually answer the question, what's the actual condition? With as much detail as you possibly can. Oftentimes we get a little too superficial in the actual condition is this, and we don't necessarily understand some of the root variables that are driving that condition. So then the next question has to do with obstacles, and what obstacles do you think are preventing you from reaching the target condition? And then out of that list of obstacles, which one do you think is the most important? Which one do you kind of want to really attack? And that becomes your next step. And then out of that, the question is, what do you expect in that next step? Because another big problem with problem solving is we think we're going to have one best answer. And oftentimes that's not the case. As a matter of fact, it's almost never that's the case. To get the best answer, you have to kind of experiment, and you got to learn, and you got to consistently learn, and you got to iterate, and you got to do that really fast. But we haven't necessarily been taught that way. And that leads to the 5th question, which, how quickly can we go and see what we learned from taking that step? That's that idea within the Japanese culture of, actually, getting out of your office, getting out of your place, and going, to the place, to the people that you're actually seeking to serve, and actually seeing what's going on. So anyway, just a little bonus for you tonight for attending. And then that's kind of it, I guess. So we've got a few minutes left. We've got 2 or 3 minutes left for questions. As Bob said, reach out to Bob, reach out to me, reach out to Ann. We'll get back to you in relatively short order. And so,
and Matt, I just wanted to mention that I put the PowerPoint into the chat room so people can just download it from there if they wish. If you can't do that, just send me an email and I'll send it to you.
Okay. The PowerPoint just was yours, right, Bob? It
Yes.
didn't have last couple slides.
Right.
I'll see if I can't do the same thing with this other one, but I'll cut out all the first slides so that there's not as much overlap.
Okay.
Any last minute questions before Annette?
I'd like to ask Oksana something. Is she still there?
She is.
Oksana?
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, hey, Oksana, Annette. Very nice job there on yours. My question, I think you said at the end, was it yourself that gave some actions to the different committees, or did you have them sit down and provide some action steps to your strategic plan initiatives? Can you describe that for me, please?
The actions that are showing up in our plan were developed by that strategic planning evening, where because we had organized tables according to those themes and looked at what steps needed to happen. So that was kind of flushed out shortly after. Now, some of them really naturally lie with committees. So we're now saying, here are pieces from the strategic plan that we would like you to move forward.
Okay, all right.
That's an excellent question, Annette. I'll just share with you what we do at the district level. Once we get the tactics established and the goals established, then we sit down as a group with the district governor group and say, who's the most appropriate person? Which committee can deal with this the best? And sometimes it's not one, sometimes it's two or three. And so they share that particular tactic and goal.
Great, thank you.
All right.
Jim Simpson, I see your hand, and then Timothy, I'll get to you next.
Hi, Bob. You did pretty good. Did a pretty good job in the deep end of the pool, having been pushed in. I thought you did pretty good. I wanted to ask a question about implementation and getting there, because all clubs have a fixed capacity for doing things. I know there's some philosophy that, you know, ask a busy man to get it done, but when we did this last, we had all sorts of dreams, all sorts of ideas, all sorts of things that we were going to do. But at no point in the process was there any review of those things that we wanted to jettison or not do. Any thoughts on how to get rid of the legacy stuff that just keeps coming, staying with you, and you can't get beyond the legacy stuff because it has a single champion in your club and you don't want to disappoint him or her?
Well, I can tell you what we do at the district level. We ask for those things to be handed in reports, and they become like the notes that are attached. It's very similar to how I take minutes for a meeting. I don't take minutes verbatim. I do 4 columns. One is decisions that we made. So those are things that motions go to. Action items. Here's who's going to do what. Future consideration. Here's some things we're going to look at a future meeting. And the last one is notes. And the notes are those reports about they're sending out the dictionaries to the schools and that sort of thing. And we just put those at one side, and we put the emphasis, we put the time at the district level on looking at the things that we have established are the most important things for the club. That's what we want. That's what we want to look at. If we didn't say that these things were the most important things for the organization, we're not going to be looking at them as much.
Yeah, ditto. I think, Jim, from my perspective, right, if you're trying to do them all, right, you're doing a bit of boiling the ocean. So that's really the idea of really that big list really needs to funnel down into a manageable list. And most likely that's a lot smaller than you think. It might just be 3 or 5 main initiatives. Everything else can stay on a list, you know, but call it a parking lot, call it a, you know, whatever. And if you have that one person that's the super champion and wants to take that on, and, you know, that's their thing, and they don't need a lot of club support, then, right, I mean, you can experiment with that as well. But
remember what the first criteria was for all those things? Is it realistic? If it's not realistic, there's no sense in doing it. But I know it's tough for people to give things up. I know that.